Okay, looks like we're live.
Yeah, I think we are.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Lovely. Okay, we'll just see if there's anybody joining. Yeah, I can see one person.
That could be me joining in on my phone.
One person at the moment. Okay, let's just wait a minute. Yeah. 3 people joining. That's great. I'm here with Deputy Alves today. I'm Deputy Doublet. We're here in the States building. We're just waiting for a few more people to join. How many have we got now?
About 8.
We've got 10 people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hello, Phoebe. Just seen a comment there.
Oh, lovely. Let's see if I can get that open.
Hey, Cheyenne. Hi, Mary. Thanks for tuning in. Hi, Monty.
Some fellow States members watching, I guess. Okay, should we make a start then? Welcome to our first live Q&A about becoming a States member, which just happens to coincide with International Women's Day. As you can see, we're following the social distancing guidelines, and we have run this past the medical officer, and as it's our workplace, we have had permission to remove our masks so that we can have the discussion with you this evening. So I'm Deputy Doublet, Chair of the Diversity Forum for the States Assembly.
I'm Deputy Alves, and I'm the Chair of the Privileges and Procedures Committee.
With the election taking place next year, I can't believe that's actually nearly
nearly
upon us.
Where has the time gone?
Yeah, it's just over a year away. So this is a great time to find out more about the process of campaigning and the practicalities of being a States member. And men and women, anyone's welcome to ask questions tonight. And of course, as we are doing this on International Women's Day, we are embracing the spirit of the day. And the theme this year is Choose to Challenge.
Yeah, so I think on that note, we actually attended a event in Guernsey. When was it now?
It was before the pandemic hit, so it was over a year ago.
Yeah, was it 2019?
Yeah. It was the Women in Public Life group.
That was it,
in Guernsey.
Yeah, and at that event there was a presentation, and one of the facts that was read out in that presentation was that the research shows that in order to apply for a job, any job, women feel that they need to meet 100% of the criteria, while men usually apply after meeting about 60%, which to me was kind of the penny dropped moment. And it made me realise a lot of sort of conversations that I'd had with women friends about applying for jobs and things, and I think that statistic is pretty spot on, if I'm honest. And this also can be applied to becoming a politician. Jersey has 13 elected members at the moment, women members. And
out of 49 in total?
Yes, out of 49. So this is about 28%, whilst the population is obviously virtually 50-50, with slightly more women than men, actually.
Yeah.
So
we're this evening, later on we can tell you more about this, but Diversity Forum is launching a new campaign which will be promoting diverse candidates to stand in the next elections. Now, I just want to make it clear at this point, this isn't about telling people who to vote for. It's not about voting at all. This is about encouraging people to put themselves forward for election. And then obviously once people are at the ballot box, it's totally up to the electorate to choose candidates that they think are competent. But what we actually need to see more of is diverse people, women and people from minority backgrounds, to put themselves forwards and have a go.
Yeah, I think ultimately it's about giving you guys, the voters, the choice, and I think that's what's lacking at the minute. You know, for example, about 10 to 15% of the population are Portuguese, and yet only 5% of representation through elected members. That's basically me. And yeah, so I think it is important to say that the campaign isn't about reaching quotas for any minority or underrepresented groups. It never has been, and it won't be about that. It is just about offering choice. And actually, why is it that we're not getting 50% of women actually putting themselves forward as candidates? Because if you look at the number of candidates that come forward, it's not an even split.
No.
So it's about understanding those barriers, and what might prevent them from seeing public office as an option as well for them. I think we've talked about this before between ourselves. So yeah, basically it's a time to just challenge those issues as a community.
Yeah. So in terms of what we're going to talk about this evening, so we've had some questions in already. So we've got a few of those questions already, but you know, as the conversation flows, and we're just going to be talking to each other and responding to your questions, and you know, really it's up to you what you'd like us to talk about. So please do just pop things in the chat there, in the comments, and we'll try to address your questions as best we can. And also, if there are any, so not just about the process of standing for election, but if there are any, you know, big issues that you, especially women, because it's International Women's Day, if there's any things that you'd like to ask us about, like the work that we're doing as parliamentarians, we'd be happy to answer questions about that as well. So, do you want to pick a question, either for me to answer or to answer yourself from the ones that have already come in?
Both, yeah. So the first question we've got here is, what drove you to stand for election, and what was the process like?
Well, for me, it was actually the fact that I could already see somebody doing the job. Because I knew Tracy Fowler, who of course is now a senator and has been in the job. I think she was 25 when she first stood for election. So I remember supporting her during her campaign, and certainly when she won on election night, it was just one of the most inspiring moments, you know, that I've ever seen. And so to me, it was quite normal that a young woman would do this job, because I could see Tracy doing it, and she was really good at it. And it was just a normal thing. So that's why I think actually it is important that people can see themselves in the States Assembly, because then they think, actually, I can go and do that job. So yeah, it was the fact that I could see someone who was doing it, and also it was issues that I was passionate about. So I was a teacher at the time, and I have no political background whatsoever, you know, none. I was just a regular person teaching in a primary school.
Supposed to be irregular now.
I still am just a normal person, and yeah, you know, there are things I wasn't happy with in terms of policies that we were being asked to implement in the schools for the children. And when I started thinking, well, where are these policies coming from? And I realised, well, actually, it's just being decided by human beings just like me. And actually, if I could go and be a part of that decision-making process, it was like a light bulb moment for me. And also, another thing that made me think about standing was people asked me to stand. So people started saying to me, you know, there's an election coming up, you'd be really good in that role, why don't you give it a go? And I know that there's been campaigns in the UK, I think it's the Ask Her to Stand campaign, and they found that women often have to be asked around 3 times to actually stand. So this is what I think is important. Even if you yourself don't want to stand for election, if you know a competent woman, or someone from a Portuguese background, or a younger person, or a disabled person, you know, somebody who might have that diverse point of view that we maybe don't have enough of, you could encourage them to stand for election and, you know, offer them support. But even if you just say to them, you know, I think you're really intelligent and you're really competent and you've got something to add, that's a really powerful thing to give to someone, and can really encourage them.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think it's sometimes difficult to compliment others, isn't it? Especially when you don't really know someone as well. And I witnessed you doing this at that event, and I was quite blown away by it actually, because I would often think, even though you're thinking about it, you don't often think to actually verbalise it.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, what drove me to stand for election? It's funny because we'd often have discussions as friends around the table, and it would often end up with, "Oh, you should go and be in the States or whatever." And I would often, like, joking, genuinely joking around, going, "Yeah, maybe one day I will. Maybe one day I will stand."
Look at you now.
I know, right? But I never thought I would be here. I think with me, obviously, I stood with Reform Jersey. And actually, it was through conversation with a mutual, with a work colleague actually at the time, who knew somebody in Reform Jersey, and they approached me actually. And I have to say that I think if I hadn't been approached, I probably wouldn't have stood. And it comes back to what you were saying about being told
asked,
or being
yeah.
asked, and
builds your confidence.
yeah, it really does. And I'll be honest, I did say that I would do it, and then I pulled out, and I thought, no, I can't do it. You know, no.
So there was some uncertainty before you.
Yeah, there
took
was,
the
and
leap.
and actually that actually came a little bit from family members who were saying, oh, you know, you've got to put yourself out there a little bit. You know, is that really what you want to do? You know, do you want to come out of a permanent role that you're currently in, and things like that? So it's all these little kind of seeds of doubts that were planted, and then I think I left it for a couple of weeks, and I heard actually I heard somebody on the radio talking about how they wanted to stand but couldn't because they didn't have a British passport. And that made me really angry.
So you decided to go in there.
Yeah, and then I went home and I thought about it for another couple of days, and I got back in touch with Reform Jersey and said, you know what, yes, okay, what have I got to lose?
Yeah, and actually there's a question that's come in from Cheyenne, I hope I pronounced that correctly, which relates to what you're saying, Karina, and she's asking, is standing alone or entering via a party more beneficial?
I think I'm a bit biased in that.
Well, you know, this is a good question to ask because you're with a political party and I'm not, so I think we can give two perspectives.
Yeah, so I think personally, yes, because you've got that wealth of experience behind you, and this isn't a role that comes with a job description.
Yeah.
And I think we've often spoken about this amongst ourselves. You know, how do you actually describe what you do to somebody? Because it can be really varied.
Yeah. And it's different from person to person as well.
Yeah, and it's not, and I think this probably adds to kind of the lack of confidence for people to put themselves forwards, because it's not something that you can train in. So I often, and I've said this a few times to people, when I've had a bit of a crisis of confidence or whatever, it's because I don't feel like I've had training in this job, or I've not been able to do this in a voluntary role and therefore learn what the job's about, because it's not really like that. And I think actually that's probably something that we need to look into, which is kind of and I think we spoke about this.
I can address that in a minute.
So for me it was, you know, and one of the things that people would always say is, oh, well, you're used to kind of standing up in front of a class of 30 teenagers teaching maths of all subjects. You know, you can do this is a dod. And I'm like, yeah, but I've got a degree in maths, it's different. And you know, and I think we touched on this before we went live, about how you feel like you need to know everything about everything, when actually you don't. And in the beginning, when I first came into this role, I almost completely burnt out because I was trying to keep on top of everything and know everything about everything, and you physically can't. You have to concentrate on the areas that you're interested in and pursue that. So for me, it was really beneficial having that party behind me, just bouncing ideas off each other. I think obviously we've got one member that's been there for nearly 20 years, been in the assembly for nearly 20 years. So even just little things like procedures and stuff, that I probably wouldn't feel confident approaching just anyone
Mhm.
because I didn't know them, but I knew that I had that kind of security of the party, of other members with experience there. So for me, yeah, definitely. I don't think I could have done it on my own.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good perspective to have, and I know there's other parties emerging, so there will be more options for people there. I mean, personally, for me, I chose not to join a political party, and I think in some ways I was lucky because I did already know somebody, so I could ask Tracy for advice, and I was so lucky that I had that, and I think anyone who is considering standing for election now um, will possibly be looking for a way in. And in the UK, it is political parties. You would get involved with campaigning at a local level, and then you move up.
Yeah, because
Yeah,
you often have
yeah,
sort of the youth, kind of the youth sections of the parties as well.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it does, in some areas it starts very young.
yeah.
Yeah.
But in Jersey, the gatekeepers to the parliament are the parliamentarians who are already in there. And this is something that we learned from the academics that we had a workshop for states members that Diversity Forum set up. So I feel that there is a responsibility to states members, whether they're in a political party or not, to be open to helping people that are interested to stand. And we'll be launching something later tonight, actually, from the Diversity Forum, which is going to be a toolkit and a package of support available to anyone who wants to stand. It is targeted at people from diverse backgrounds, and we're hoping to encourage those from diverse backgrounds to come forward and stand for election. And that support will be there. And for me, I also got support from something that was happening when I first stood for election, which was run by the Jersey Community Relations Trust. So they were doing workshops, and so I think I went to one about how to write your campaign leaflets. There was one about how to talk to the media and how to speak. And in the graph, they ran sessions, explaining all the processes. So in terms of training, actually, I think there is training there. It's not like a qualification that you can go and get like when you teach. We've both gone through our PGCE and then followed that pathway to be a teacher. But I think that that information and the knowledge and understanding that is there, and it's going to be even better for the next election because Diversity Forum have been working really hard on that with the graph, and I know that PPC are supporting that as well. So yeah, look out for that. Anybody who's thinking about standing, um, and also I think anyone who does want to stand and wants just an informal chat, I'm very happy to talk to people, and have a coffee or have a half an hour on the phone just to answer any questions. And I know that most of the states members would do that. So if you know a states member who you think aligns with your values, just reach out to them and say, look, I'm thinking of standing. Can you answer some of my questions? And I think most states members would be happy to do that, wouldn't they?
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
So yeah, I will give more details about that about the package at the end, about the campaign.
Okay, so we've got another question here that I can see on the live feed. So it says, how can we address um, and overcome barriers such as institutionalised sexism, nationality issues, and poverty, which prevent women from standing for election?
Okay, that's a tricky one. There's a lot in there. I mean, institutionalized sexism. Okay, so in the Diversity Forum, one of the first things that we did when I set up the forum, we did something called a gender audit, which looked at the states as a parliament, as an institution, to see how kind of gender sensitive we are. So do we think about issues? So when we're discussing a new law, have we considered how this law is going to affect men and women differently? But also, is our parliament inclusive? So once men and women are in our parliament, do they get included at all the different levels? And actually we found that they didn't. In fact, I can find that report in a minute. But in terms of overcoming some of that, it's a really tricky one, and I'm not sure that I have all the answers. I think sometimes you just have to put yourself forwards, don't you? And and it happens kind of naturally. I mean, is there anything you want to say about that?
I think just picking up on the nationality issues, obviously, we know that at the moment you've got to have a British passport to stand for election. Obviously, there's been a couple of propositions that have come to the Assembly. There was one at the last sitting that was looking at how we can change that. Obviously, these always go to a vote, and they're just not getting through. And when it's something like this, I think, I mean, ideally, everybody's got their own sort of viewpoint on the kind of requirement to be British to stand. I know lots of competent people, for example, who have come over at a very young age and now in their 30s and would need to take British citizenship in order to be able to stand for election. My personal view is that's not fair, because I think, you know, they've got the permanent entitled status. So and unfortunately it is a barrier for some people. I know that people think that in order to show your commitment to the island, then absolutely you should become British. However, there is obviously a cost associated with that, which is quite significant for some people. So I think, like I said, my view is that I don't think it should be a requirement, but obviously we've debated it a few times, and we've heard various arguments, and you know you'll always get people opposing that, and unfortunately they haven't been successful.
So there is more work for us to do as a parliament to try and take away some of the barriers, and you know it's not about making things easier for one particular group and giving you know one group an advantage over another group. It's about removing the barriers that might be there for particular groups, so that everyone has a level playing field.
Absolutely.
In terms of accessing the parliament and engaging with politics. And I've just found the gender audit report that we did in the diversity forum, and you know just some of the things that we have already started doing in terms of gender issues. So we've amended standing orders so that members can be recorded as absent because of parental care responsibilities. And now that applies to men and women. So if a states member does become a parent, the guidance now is that they can be absent from sittings for up to 6 months. So that to me, you know, makes the job of states member, or the role of states member, a lot more accessible, because I know that people sometimes might worry about whether it's compatible, you know, with family life. I find that it is compatible. You still have to work really, really hard, but the one benefit of the job is that it is flexible, and you know there are many members that run their own businesses as well as being states members. So you know, in the same way that you can juggle a business with the role of states member, you can absolutely juggle family life as well. We've also changed standing orders to make them gender neutral, because when I entered the States, I had to be called a chairman of the scrutiny panel that I chaired. And I did question it, and I was told, no, you cannot call yourself chairwoman because it's in the standing orders. So all of my press releases went out with that title. And actually, when you're talking, say you're talking to a group of children in a primary school and explaining what your job is in the States Assembly, if you say I'm a chairman, you know, they need to see that women can do this job, and that it is, you know, you can equally be a chairwoman, because language really does matter. And it's about dispelling that image that I think is so deeply rooted in Jersey culture, that the ideal states member is a businessman. You know, I don't know if that's something that you've found, Karina, but I find that that's almost the standard that we're judged against. And of course, you know, a retired businessman can make a fantastic states member, and we've got several of them, you know,
Absolutely.
we could hold up as an example. But if our entire states assembly was made up of the same type of person, how could we possibly make decisions which are in the best interest of our, you know, really diverse community? You know, we just couldn't.
Um, okay, so we've had an interesting question here. There are arguments for and against election posters on environmental grounds. They should be banned, but in terms of cost, they are a barrier to the less well-off candidates. What are your opinions of public election posters being banned?
It's a really interesting question.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I think the cost aspect here is a really good point. And when we were looking at, so I've been working for the past sort of 2 years on the electoral reform propositions that has now been accepted. Will be coming back to the States to finalise. And obviously some of the things that we heard from other States members as well was that the cost of standing can be a barrier. Obviously now with some of the districts being larger in size than what they have traditionally been, so we have been looking at sort of ideas of how we can maybe provide something to offset that cost. So for example, in Guernsey, I believe they gave all their candidates.
I think it was £500.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Or they were allowed to claim expenses.
Yeah.
For, you know, election expenses, costs, election costs.
Yeah.
Up to 500.
See, and it's funny you corrected yourself there, because that's another thing. I think a lot of people, when they stand for election, and I've heard this from the greffier actually, they think that whatever costs they incur from standing for the campaign, because it's called election expenses, they think that can all be claimed back.
Oh,
and
no, we fund it all ourselves, don't we? But it's not actually, you can do it on a budget though.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one of the things we were looking at was maybe putting together packs, so that obviously at the moment the vote.je booklet is quite big because you've got the senators in there. But we could potentially condense that and mean that candidates could have a larger, instead of 500 words, they could say, I don't know, maybe 2 sides of A4 or whatever, and it would be specific to your district. So depending on which district you live in, so you wouldn't be getting like the vote.je booklet that would cover everybody in every district. You'd be getting it solely for your district based on the new districts.
That makes more sense, doesn't it, really? In terms of environment as well.
And another kind of thing that I brought up during in PPC as well, kind of, which would help with the environmental aspects of this, was that although those vote.je booklets are really good, don't get me wrong, but I think people's leaflets shows a part of their own personality.
The booklets are standardised, aren't they? You've got a word limit, and it's just one photo, and it's all just plain text, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So I spoke about maybe including people's leaflets in those packs, but actually I also spoke about uploading them as a PDF version onto the website, so that if they're not, because a lot of the time candidates end up delivering them themselves, because actually getting them delivered to every single house can be really costly.
Yeah. Oh, I've always delivered mine by hand. I've never used the post.
Exactly. Yeah. But there's always going to be places that you're going to miss out.
Yeah. You know? Well, yeah.
And I remember actually going on the last campaign with Jeff and taking him to some places where he'd never been before within the district. So that was So I think that
probably it's a bigger district as well, isn't it? You know, my district in St Saviour 2 is fairly manageable, and you know, I had the aim of going to every house, and you know, I think I managed, you know, a fair percentage of them. But then some of the districts and, you know, parishes are a lot bigger, so there's.
Well, it's not even that. I think because you've got so much development going on as well, you don't always know that actually if you just go around the back of this one road, that there's a whole estate there, or you know, block of flats or
so
whatever.
there's things that might change in
Yeah,
terms of
and I would like to
information.
see the leaflets, each person's leaflet actually displayed on vote.je as a download.
But in terms of the posters, I have to say, I don't think it's not a bad idea, saying that election posters are banned, and I don't think I'm not sure sometimes that it really adds anything to the process. So I think if there was a strong public feeling that people didn't want election posters displayed, then I think I would be fine with that.
I think my concern with that is that at the moment our voter turnout is so low as it is, only being
That's
30%.
true. So it raises awareness of people who aren't really that interested, and they might see a poster. Yeah, I think it's maybe one to think about.
Yeah, I think maybe not so much now. That is definitely something to look to in the future. In the way as well that we kind of raise awareness and things like that.
People do reuse them though. I mean, my fellow deputy, Kevin Lewis, I'm sure he's had his banner for many years. So that's very eco-friendly.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, all the boards are kept.
Yeah, well, I use my boards twice, and I might even reuse my posters. So yeah. We've got another question here from Alison. Is there disabled access to the chamber? And this is actually a question that's quite close to my heart, Alison, because my late grandmother, who's only just recently passed away, she used a wheelchair, so she was never able to come to the public gallery to see me, even though she was really interested and really supportive of me, and it's something that has come up several times. And you know, the fact that, I mean, we're in the States building now, in one of the meeting rooms. It's such an old building that we would that I think it has been looked into, and the permissions just wouldn't be granted to make, you know, the changes that need to be made, which isn't really good enough, is it? Really, but what I do know actually is I bumped into Deputy Judy Martin, and she tells me that she's actually taking this issue on, and she's been speaking to a member of the public who's campaigning on this. So I think what these issues need is a champion.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, it's fair to say, Karina, isn't it, that you've been something of a champion for the Portuguese community, you know, because they relate to you. And you know, when I had my child 4 years ago, and you know, parents would come to me with their issues, so you know, I was able to champion those issues and move them forwards. It often, you know, to make progress on these issues, it takes a champion. So hopefully Judy Martin might be starting to do some work on that, and
I think
find a solution.
Not just a champion, but just somebody that is relatable and has that kind of lived experience.
Yes.
I know that a lot of people, when I was door knocking, who have been here 30 years, and actually I think I saw somebody earlier on the feed say that they've never voted, but they will be next time. I think just having that conversation, and also there's a lack of awareness, because we've kind of got, there's so many tiers within Jersey. You've got obviously 10 years to be entitled to rent, and to rent certain properties, and to buy. Then you've got the 5 years working rule. Well, to vote it's 2 years, but not a lot of people know that. So I was knocking on some people's doors who were like, oh, but I thought I need residential qualifications to be able to vote. And I was like, no, well, actually, you know, and kind of just talking through the process. So yeah, it's not just having a champion, but I think having somebody that, you know, is relatable, and people feel like they can approach you. There was an interesting question here as well, from Phoebe, that says, what questions did you feel most helpful to ask when you were starting out?
What questions to ask?
I assume of other members, or when we were starting out, or when before campaign.
Can I just add something though on the disabled issue? And I'm sure I've heard this said before. If somebody wanted to stand, and they had, you know, a physical disability, if that person was elected, if they stood for election and they were elected, we would just have to accommodate them.
Yeah.
You know, that however old the building is, you know,
Yes,
I'm pretty sure that the State Scrub have said they would just have to provide whatever is necessary, you know, whatever accommodations that person needed to do their job as an elected member that you know, who the public have put into that role.
We do
so
have a
people
lift.
shouldn't be put off, should they?
We do have a lift. I think it's just it's the access to the public gallery. That's the issue. So that there is disabled access for members, if you like, because I mean, we had, was it Deputy Pinner that broke her leg, or
she did, she did,
so there is access there, but
Can you see the comments there?
Yes, I can. Yeah. So that question from Phoebe about what questions did we find most helpful to ask when we were starting out?
That's a tricky one. I'm not really sure how to answer that. I might have a think on that one and come back to it.
I think for me it was around kind of how does the whole thing. So when we had 2 weeks training. I don't know if you had the same thing.
There is an induction. So again, I'd forgotten about that actually. There is training when you get in there. You're not just thrown in there. It's an induction, isn't it?
It's an induction. It's and so I think it was. If I'm honest, I was afraid to ask questions because it was just, because you're being bombarded with a lot of information about how things work or not, and I think there's also you come in with like a kind of, you think that other people expect you to know exactly what's going on, and even though I had an interest in politics, and I had followed Jersey politics kind of in and out, kind of going to university and things like that, when you're kind of faced with all of this information, you realise that, oh, actually, I was only scratching the surface.
But you don't need to know everything, do you?
No, not at all.
And I certainly don't.
I'm
not an expert on everything.
No, not at all.
And sometimes the most powerful questions are those almost naive questions, you know, that a layperson would ask. And,
I mean, if we go, like, for example, standing orders, if I'm honest, I have no idea what standing orders was, and that's kind of the rule book for the States Assembly. So I think I'm trying to think if there was any sort of key questions that I actually asked.
I mean, I remember having a chat with Tracy, and she took me through the order paper. You know, I said, you know, what do you actually do?
Yeah, well,
and
that's it.
Yeah,
what do you actually do?
And she took me through the order paper and you know, just the order and which things happen. So the order paper is like an agenda, you know, with a list of all the things that we're going to talk about in a state's meeting. And you know, we start off with questions, so members can lodge their own oral questions, which is ones that you ask on the day, and ministers have to answer you if you're a backbencher, or you can submit your written questions, and generally then we'd move on to debating legislation. But that's not all we do.
No, well, that's it. I think that was my question. Okay, so is it just what the public, because just what the public sees is us sitting in the assembly and having...
well, they do see scrutiny hearings now.
Yeah, but I don't think that's as widely publicised. I think more recently it has been, probably because as a result of the pandemic, everybody's at home, kind of like, or they're not at home, but you know, you're more kind of looking at your screens, seeing things on Facebook that you probably wouldn't pick up on normally. And I think it was kind of finding out what you do behind the scenes. That was a really important question for me.
And a lot of the time you're working from home anyway. So I know that we're actually doing our state sittings from home at the moment.
Yeah.
But even before then, you'd have your weeks where it was a states week where you'd be in the states chamber. So you know, you'd have to make sure that you read all the all the laws that you were going to be discussing and the propositions you would be discussing. And you might prepare a speech in advance. Not always though, because I find also it's good to listen and you know, think about the viewpoints on the day. You don't have to always prepare something. You might have your own proposition lodged, which of course you'd have to be very prepared for. But in between that, you know, it's actually quite open to individual members as to what they want to do. So you can go with the issues that are really passionate to you. And for me, that's always been um, fighting for children's rights and for family issues and equality and diversity. And I love this role because I get to make a difference in those areas that I'm really passionate about. And I can't recommend this job enough. It is stressful at times.
Yeah.
It can be really stressful, and obviously it's high profile, but also the public of Jersey are generally quite respectful. I think I think that generally we do have a healthy democracy in Jersey and a respectful level of public debate. So I wouldn't want anyone to be put off because it's
And
it's manageable.
it is so varied as well. And like you said, you can kind of concentrate your energies in one area. So, for example, I get quite a lot of constituency work, and for me, that takes my priority. And although I've got ideas from oppositions and things like that, I probably don't concentrate as much of my time on that because I am dealing with kind of come forward.
What kind of things, just for people who maybe don't know what constituency work is?
Okay, so for example, I've had, I'm trying to think of one more recently. So,
obviously without giving any.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've dealt with things such as there's been breakdowns in relationships where one of the partners is a qualified, got entitled status, and they've got children, and the other partner doesn't. So I've dealt with quite a few of these ways that you can go through a process to appeal for early entitled status.
So you're kind of guiding that family through accessing one of the state's departments.
Yeah, and kind of what things need to be submitted, pointing them to policy and the kind of documents they might need to support that. I've dealt with quite a lot of housing issues. I've also dealt with children's social workers and things like that. Sometimes constituents just need a bit of support and just need somebody to kind of, I had a case where a constituent was actually really quite poorly and didn't feel like they could advocate for themselves, and so came to me for some advice, and I attended a couple of meetings, just enough to kind of make them feel confident that what they were saying was okay and that they could,
And those kind of meetings, you can, when somebody calls you and asks for help, you're in charge of your own diary, so you can say, I'm free at this time on this day, and in that sense, that kind of work. I mean, I used to arrange my meetings on a day when I had my son with me when he was really tiny, and just bring him along. And in that sense, it's really compatible with having a family, and it's the issues as well people will approach you about. It's not always people that live in your parish, so I get a lot of people from outside my parish as well, who maybe see that I'm interested in children's issues and family issues, and as well as like you said, Karina, as well as helping people to access services. Sometimes people have not had a good experience with a government department, and actually what they need is a states member to intervene and try and add a bit of gentle pressure, and that's sometimes where you can really make a difference, isn't it? Constituency work,
or even just kind of raising awareness of what the process is there. So I had one constituent that had didn't have a great experience in the hospital, and they felt powerless, and just even giving that little bit of encouragement that actually you can put in a complaint, and then if you're not happy with that output, this is what you can do afterwards. These are your options.
So you almost get your specialist areas, don't you? Because I think there's, I've been in the job a bit longer than you, but there's areas that you now have more expertise in than me, because that's what you've been focusing on, and actually we all learn from each other.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. And even within the party, if there's an area that I've not dealt with before, I know that I can go to one of my party colleagues and say, well, what would you do in this situation? Because I don't know where to go with this now. And you know, it was a steep learning curve, and you're constantly learning because things are constantly changing as well. And before, you know, a constituent issue might take me 2 days to kind of really get into it and get an outcome. And now, because I know the processes, and I really enjoy that actually. I enjoy learning about, you know, what are people's options and empowering people as well. I think that's really important.
And I think I wonder if we should have a look at some of the questions that have come in via email. It's great that we're getting questions on the comments. Can you see if there's any? Are there any more that have actually come in on the comments there? We got asked about this issue of we want the best people for the job, best person for the job. We don't want diversity quotas, and that's always an interesting one, because if you look at the evidence in education, girls outperform boys at nearly every level of education. So you know, that's the message I was send to women and girls out there, is that, you know, you are intelligent and competent enough to do this job, and you know, if women and men are equally capable of doing this job, well, actually at the moment we've only got 13 out of 49 who are women. So where are all the competent women? You know, we perhaps haven't got the best people for the job at the moment. So if we did have more of a balance, then that would be the best people for the job.
But that's also very subjective, and I think this is the kind of discussion that I have with a lot of people when they say, oh, you know, we want we want competent states members. Well, somebody that's competent in your eyes won't necessarily be somebody who's competent in my eyes. And I think we need to respect that. And that doesn't mean that you can't. Oh, this was something else that I learned from that. Was it
Women in Public Life?
No,
the academics. The seminar that we had.
That it's often easier to approach somebody who's like you and encourage them to go for this role, but it's often harder to encourage somebody who isn't necessarily like you or from the same kind of background. And I found that really interesting actually, because you know, you are probably more likely to gravitate towards somebody that you relate to as similar to you.
We tend to associate with people who are like us. It's in our comfort zone, and I think that's it. You know, it becomes a cycle, doesn't it, with our parliament? If we've got people who are all, you know, very similar and like each other, and they are, you know, tapping people on the shoulder and saying, you know, you'd be good in office. So actually, when we did that workshop, we were calling on some of the men members to actually actively go and look for diverse candidates and mentor them. And I think actually we're making real progress in terms of conversations around equality and diversity, because when I was first elected, I'm going to say 6 years ago, I think it was 6 years ago.
Yeah, it would be about that,
It might be 7 actually now. But you know, I remember saying we should have you know, a roughly equal split of men and women, and that was, you know, an outrageous thing to say at that time. Whereas now it's just common sense, isn't it? And it's more widely accepted. And I think today, when we had the International Women's Day, we had some photos at lunchtime. There were several of the members were there and are starting to be really supportive around these issues. And you know, for me, it's about men and women working together. This isn't just about women's issues. You know, as an equality campaigner, I've campaigned for the rights of men as well, and particularly fathers. So it's really important to me to have those male allies, you know, standing with us. So you know, I would call out to men as well, if you know any competent women. Or you know, any, you know, younger men or men from the Portuguese community. It isn't just more women that we need. We need more diversity, you know, across the board, so that we have got that range of viewpoints in the States Chamber, and that will bring a real quality and depth to our debate, so that we can make really good quality decisions then that are actually in the best interests of the public.
And ultimately, I think I kind of took the attitude, what have I got to lose when I stood for election? And yeah, it is daunting putting yourself out there, but sometimes you just got to kind of get out of your comfort zone and do it, and know that, reach out to anybody that you feel that you can relate to, because we are all more than happy to help and advise. And we've also got the graphics department as well, who are there to support us and deal with any queries, and they're always more than happy to have a chat on the phone and things like that. I think
they're
anybody
there to support us, aren't they? And they do actually. When I have a question and I'm not sure about something, they're quite a big team now, and there's always someone there to answer it. You're never just left kind of on your own, and we've got researchers in there now to help us with our work, so we are actually really well supported, I think. There's another question. Do you want to? So Jennifer is asking, and this is probably going to be our last question actually, because we're nearly at 5 to 8. Yeah, it has gone quickly. So Jennifer is asking, do you worry about your family seeing horrible things written about you on social media?
I actually had this a little bit. During the campaign I did have some posts flying around a little bit, and I mean, it was actually brought to my attention through, I think it was a member of my family or a friend. At the end of the day, I think, it's not easy. It's not easy reading something like that about you, especially when you know that it's not true. I think ultimately, and this is what I've said, I think I said this recently to the JP, regardless of what you may think or what your viewpoint is, I mean, myself and Louise won't always agree on everything. It's about just being respectful, and just because you might not agree with something that I say doesn't mean that gives you the right to be horrible or anything like that. There's just no need for it. And I think obviously I had to have a bit of a chat with my family, and they've always been very supportive. But I think, your family know you at the end of the day, and they know that, I've often actually said to my family, just don't tell me, I'd just rather not, I'd rather not know
that's the
what's
approach
on
I
there.
take. I tend to not look at negative things. Well, if it's constructive criticism,
yes, that's different.
That's fine. But when it's criticism that is designed to hurt or attack in an unreasonable way, then I think you do develop a thicker skin. Things like that used to upset me more than they do now. I don't think it's as bad as in the UK. I do think that generally people in Jersey, are quite respectful, but you do get the odd one. I mean, Inna Gardner, was it last week or the week before? I mean, that was awful. But actually what that has done is it's started a conversation, because I think we have all experienced it. I would say, though, it's not enough to put me off. And I don't think I know anybody who has stood down. I mean, I think Eddie Knoll mentioned that as a reason for standing down, but that's quite rare. We do get criticism, but you learn to deal with it, and we support each other with it as well. I think that is the critical thing, is that we do support each other. Whether we're members of a party or not, just as human beings, we would support each other.
I think the other thing is as well, like, I always think it's really easy to just let that one negative comment impact you amongst hundreds of positive ones. And it's about you retraining your brain, if you like, and retraining yourself to realise that, hold on, that's just one person amongst
and having confidence in yourself, which actually is a learned thing. That's not something that I had, when I was in my 20s, but you kind of learn, I think, when you are campaigning and working and speaking on something which you're really passionate about, you know, whether it's children or equality or anything that you're interested in, you let that carry you, and you speak about those issues. And from my point of view, when I stand up and make a speech, I'm speaking on behalf of the people that I represent, and I let that drive me. And in a way, you know, one or two people who are trying to attack me, it actually just pales when you speak with something about on something that you're passionate about. So that would be my advice to anyone that is thinking about standing, is just to let that passion for the issues that you care about, let that carry you through, and concentrate on that, and concentrate on the change that you can make. We're going to have to wrap this up in a minute. We've got 2 minutes left.
I was just going to say, and have someone that you can offload to. I think that's really important. Big time. You know, that doesn't have to be another states member, although I think that often helps because we understand the situation that we're in.
And it's been great having more like younger members and women members, you know, so anyone who is standing, like, there are more people who probably are like you that you could come and find support with. So it's getting better, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Do reach out though if you're even contemplating it a little bit to stand, because, you know, like I said, I never would have imagined that I was here, and I would often joke about it. In fact, I think it came up on my memories on Facebook a couple of times, some comments that, like, I'd put, one day, and it wasn't, you know, I never imagined.
And you were one of the most effective states members, in my view, and, you know, having gone from someone who was questioning whether they could do it to being in there, you know, I think people who, like you said, it was the passion for, you know, you wanted to, it's almost like anger that drives you, isn't it? Not anger, but it's
an emotional response.
It's the drive to make a positive change. You know, you've taken that and come in, and I think anyone who has that drive equally can come in and make a difference.
And like you said, you don't have to be an expert in everything, because I know there's been a couple of people recently that have said, oh, well, you know, I'm really passionate about this, but I don't know about everything else. It doesn't matter.
You can learn that stuff,
you know? So, we hope that this session has given you some kind of insight into the process of standing for election. Thanks, John. He said, well done, ladies, more like this, please. Thank you. And if you've got any questions, whether you'd like to ask them confidentially, our emails are on the States Assembly website, so that's statesassembly.gov.je, and then there's a members section there. You can either email us individually, or you can just email straight to the Grefia, and they'll answer you. But also, we've got our social media profiles that you can reach out to us, and all of our sort of contact details are on there. So please, don't be afraid. Come forward, have a chat. Always welcome to go and have a coffee somewhere.
And if you do, you know, have more questions and you are interested in that support package that's being launched, if you go onto vote.je, there should be something on there later this evening. I'm not sure if it's up there yet, but later this evening or tomorrow, you can actually subscribe on there, so you can give your email address. And it doesn't have to be your work email address or anything like that. You know, you can sign up for a new, you know, Gmail or Hotmail, or use your private email address. And once you've signed up for that, you'll start receiving information on training and events and workshops, and resources that can help you if you're thinking about standing for election, or indeed if you're thinking of somebody that you want to support standing for election, because that's, you know, that is just as important as thinking about it yourself. And also the States Assembly, obviously you're on the States Assembly Facebook right now, but there's also a Twitter account and Instagram. So yeah, I mean, just thank you for everyone who sent in questions in advance, and also engaged on the evening. I've really enjoyed it, actually.
It's been
nice.
Gone a lot quicker than I thought it would.
Okay, well, I'm gonna turn this off now, but thanks again, everybody.
Have a lovely evening, everyone.